I do remember leaving that class thinking, not necessarily that I would be a writer, but just that that what I had written made sense to somebody. It's that simple. Sometimes had made sense. Hello, my name is Laura Elvery. My book is called Nightingale. It's published by University of Queensland Press and it is out now. Nightingale is about the final 24 hours of Florence Nightingale's life. So I have fictionalised the night before she dies, which was 1910 in Mayfair in London. And she has a visitor arrive. And the visitor who arrives sets in motion some flashbacks to the Crimean War 55 years earlier, when Florence was a young woman pioneering nursing, and her life interconnects with two other characters during the Crimean War. Florence was not an invisible woman. At the time, she's the most second famous woman, second only to Queen Victoria in England. So she was also very wealthy, raised in privileged circumstances, educated well, had all these connections. A family friend was the Secretary of War. She wrote loads of correspondence, loads of reports, very well known in her time, and, still very well known now as International Nurses Day the other day, celebrated on her birthday every single year. Very famous woman. My interest came when I was finishing Ordinary Matter, which is my second book about Nobel Prize winning women in the sciences. And my mind made a bit of a leap to Florence Nightingale at that point when I was finishing that work. And I wondered about how old she was when she died. I thought it was younger than she was. I thought about, as I started to research and realise what happened during the Crimean War and the state of the hospital that she arrived at, the way she was able to, a very complex woman was able to introduce really interesting concepts to us now, or basic concepts: ventilation, sanitation, hand washing, treating patients with a level of dignity regardless of their religion, understanding the distinction between doctors and nurses, and establishing it as a really as a career that middle class and working class women could aspire to be. The more and more I researched about her and realised she lived till she was 90, quite unwell, I just had this idea that she was haunted at some points in her life from her bedroom in Mayfair. And I wondered, what might she have been haunted by? Levels of guilt she might have felt, the memories she had of the travel she had done, the people she'd met, and that sort of set in motion the idea. And then there was a knock at the door at this beautiful home in Mayfair near Hyde Park. And I wondered, what is that setting in motion? And the way I write is very much that it's revealed to me as I write often. What is this man here to ask? What is his question? His name is Silas. He needs something from her. He thinks she has an answer for him and that he can help her in these final moments of her life. And there's so much written about Florence Nightingale. I read a lot of biographies about her. So this is not a biography. Nightingale is somewhat historical fiction, like you said, in that it's based on a lot of research about Florence's life biographically. And I stuck to the historical record for a lot of it and then diverged whenever I wanted to, in the way that, fiction is very liberating. And I had no intention of writing another biography or writing even a fictionalized biography of her life. So much is left out. And then I've reintroduced other things, and I've introduced two characters of my own, as you mentioned, so that it wasn't just Florence's life from birth in Italy in 1820 to her death in 1910. I very swiftly, this person at the front door that I knew was knocking, Silas Bradley, he appeared to me, and he is on her front step talking to a young woman who is looking after Florence in her final moments, called Mabel. And he says to Mabel, I knew Florence 55 years earlier in the Crimean War, which, because being the sort of character Mabel is, takes him at his word. This is a young man on her doorstep, and she is, rather guileless about it. The other character I've introduced, who came a bit later actually to me, is the character of Jean Frawley, a young woman who comes from very different circumstances to Florence. Florence travelled to Egypt and Germany and Greece and Italy in very beautiful circumstances with her family and family friends. And I wondered about these young women who Florence took to the Crimean War in November of 1854. She took a band of 38 nurses. So that's all real. She gathered them together quite hastily upon request to go to Crimea and help the British Army. And I wondered, who are these 38 women? Some of them were sort of from religious orders. Others were just working class women, middle class women. But I thought, what is motivating a young woman to take this really unknown journey from Folkestone to Marseille to Constantinople? I really believe they did not know what they were getting into. I believe Florence didn't know what she was getting into. The barracks when they arrived were far worse than I think we can probably actually quite picture, and the Victorian literature probably sanitized it even a little bit, the words that they used. So Jean is my creation, but based on some research about the sorts of women who were sort of favourites of Florence, the types of nurses I thought she might be attracted to, even as they were learning the profession of nursing as they went. I thought, what sort of a person is a bit of a foil to Florence, but can stand her ground against this already, she was superintendent of female nursing. She was very, her rank was really high rank. What sort of a woman would be interesting to Florence and would be able to prove herself? And that's the character of Jean. And then Silas, the soldier. All three of them are connected. I went to a couple of houses where Florence lived, another house, Claydon House, where she used to stay a lot with her sister in the later parts of her life, Florence Nightingale Museum, so a few places in England like that, up in Derbyshire, and just to get a sense of the natural surrounds, the village, the Derwent River that ran past her childhood home, those sorts of things. I've written 2 short story collections, Trick of the Light and Ordinary Matter. So it's my debut novel. I'd written novel manuscripts for, tertiary courses and things like that. But this one never presented itself to me as a short story. Like, I love the short story form. I still love writing short stories, but this one was never going to be a short story. I knew straight away this was a novel, and it's just really interesting to have it in, I had the idea maybe 5 years ago. I work and parent and all these sorts of things. So it's probably about 4 or 5 years all told that I wrote it. But it's just really different to hold one idea in your mind for 4 or 5 years rather than multiple characters, multiple short stories all of the time. So I've been with Florence, and I still continue to find really interesting things about her life, even after the book is published. She's very interesting to me. A couple of things I did while writing Nightingale that became nice habits for me after a day at work, after the children were in bed. My friend, a couple of writer friends and I in Brisbane, we would sit down at 8 o'clock and write for an hour, not on Zoom, not on camera. We wouldn't talk to each other. We would just text and say, I'm up for an hour of writing tonight. So we'd do that a bit. And at the end of the hour, you just sort of tell everyone how you went. But there was just something about knowing that in all these other houses in, Brisbane or whatever, somebody else was sitting there at the computer trying to write a scene or trying to write 200 words or 1,000 words, whatever it might be. So I did that a few times for Nightingale. I write in the library. I write at cafes, pubs. Like, I don't mind noise when I'm writing. Before work sometimes. All over. I have no consistent pattern at all. A couple of nice people in a writing group that I was in for a few years that was very useful. And so they probably read the first iterations of, even if those scenes aren't even in Nightingale anymore, some of them would be. I read early parts of Nightingale I was a writer in residence at University of Queensland in 2021. And I remember reading probably a scene I'd just written during that residency to a salon group of uni students. And I do remember people really taking to that scene and taking to that. It's an early part. It's still in the book. And there is something really lovely about showing really fresh work. I love hearing other people's really new work. I know some people don't love doing that, but I'm fine with sharing new work. Really work in progress. So I do like hearing people's initial reactions about that. Feels like something I would like to hear more of. Like, that's really all a writer needs to hear is keep going, or I'm intrigued about these sorts of things. So yeah, writers groups, my husband, and then I would have shown, a couple of other trusted author friends, early parts of it. The question is, what do I do to overcome writer's block? I do a couple of things. I might read something that has a similar tone to the type of passage I'm looking to write. Go for a walk, go for a run, talk to somebody about it. And I find that I can usually work out a problem if I just have an opportunity to explain to somebody else what that problem is. And eventually either they come around to it or I'll actually come around to it most times myself. Yeah. I feel really lucky to be able to write. I feel really lucky to be published. You're wearing your Readers and Writers Against the Genocide t-shirt. I have my own t-shirt. I think it is really, really important, and I'm part of a group in Brisbane who shares those sentiments. I think it's really important that we find ways to still find joy in the art that we create, to still be okay with following our passions, following our creativity, and all of those sorts of things. And I feel really privileged to be able to do that. But for me, it comes down to who am I reading? The sorts of, books and voices I'm reading is really important to me. Am I reading diverse voices? Am I going to their events at bookstores? Am I going to their panels at writers' festivals? Am I spruiking their books on social media? Because even though, we all have a bit of a platform, I think, even though I'm not the most famous author at all, but I do like being able to share other people's stories in that way and pressing those books into the hands of people I love and say, you should read this book, or you should come to this festival panel with me and hear what this person has to say. About 4 or 5 books on the go. I brought 3 with me on this trip. At the moment, I'm reading a book called Idle Grounds by Crystal Bamford, which a bookseller, I love it. A bookseller at Riverbend in Brisbane said, you have to read this. So I take a lot of recommendations from booksellers, actually, at Avid Reader and Riverbend, all these bookstores. I'm reading Glyph by Ali Smith. Ali Smith does something that I just admired so much in the Seasonal Quartet, which I was reading years ago, kind of when I was thinking about Nightingale, actually, and the way in those books Ali Smith so confidently moves through time and takes the reader on a journey through time that is very confident, where it's now we're here, now we're here, now we're here, stay with me. And I really liked that tone that she sets in the Seasonal Quartet. So I'm reading her new one called Glyph. And the other one that I packed on the plane yesterday was Little World by Josephine Rowe, which is a beautiful novella. I'm already halfway through it. I really like that. And I was doing a Master of Creative Industries at QT, and I was very nervous, and I'd come from a different career. So this was all new to me, to be a writing student. And I got used to being critiqued in class, and I knew my time was coming, that somebody would have to read, the whole class would have to read what I had written, and they put it up on the screen. And it was just a little an exercise that we'd had for homework. And I do remember the lecturer at the time modelling a really lovely way of framing critique, which is hard to do in a class. And I was so petrified. But the way he took the group through pointing out things in this little passage I'd written, the way they responded really naturally to pointing out what they liked about it. I do remember leaving that class thinking, not necessarily that I would be a writer, but just that that what I had written made sense to somebody. It's that simple. Sometimes had made sense. They'd enjoyed it. They'd responded positively in the moment to it. And they looked at it with care and a bit of respect. And I hold that memory really fondly, actually. I'm working on my next novel, which somebody has always said to me, have the next thing on the go when you're, promoting a book. And it's very different. It actually started from a short story, or something that I thought would be a short story last year, which is very unusual for me, that I wanted to expand on it, but I just kept on coming back to it. And it kept on being the piece of writing that I wanted to return to. So I'm going to work on that quietly and try and get a really basic, imperfect first draft down, in a year or two. Thank you, Katie. Thanks.